I'd like to call to order the April 20th meeting of the WTA Board of Directors. Can we have a roll call, please, Audra?
Sure. Davidson.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Huthman. Here. Lautenbach. Oh. Lilliquist.
Here.
Sadhu.
Here.
Darwin.
Yep.
All right, and we are missing Todd Donovan, Seth Fleetwood, and Jennifer Lautenbach.
Okay, hopefully, again, some of those people will join us. Are there any citizen communications that we should know about, or any members of the public who would like to unmute and be recognized to address the board?
We have not received any written comments.
I don't see any virtual hands being raised. Okay, we'll go on from citizen communications to board action. We have 3 board actions this morning in addition to the consent agenda. First one is consideration of a contract for construction of infrastructure upgrades at Cordata Station for electrical hardware charging. Mr. Reardon, is there anything before we go to Andy?
Nope. Over to Andy.
Yep, okay, just looking for approval to enter into a contract with Burton Construction. This project is extending power up a side street and then setting a transformer on WTA property, which would then be used to install 2 electric chargers for our buses on WTA property and allow the city of Bellingham to connect to the transformer and then further install charging for public, for personal vehicles.
So Andy, it's upsized for that public use. How upsized is it? Is there actual room for more buses as well as public vehicles in the future?
It would allow us to have 2 chargers on site for buses that might need charging on route. So it's just for 2 basically chargers for buses.
Are there some components that can be easily upsized? For example, underground conduits that can be oversized. Is there any aspect that's being oversized beyond what it already is?
Yeah, we actually did a revision to the drawings and upsized the transformer to accommodate future needs.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions or motion?
Two questions. When you say you've upsized it for future needs, what's the capacity that you've upsized it to? And is there a reason why we're just doing 2 today, not 4 or 8? And also the ones that are available to the public, is there going to be a charge to the public for that use?
As far as public that use, that would be City of Bellingham answer. And we only have room for 2 chargers at that station. It's in platform C, which is kind of the overflow holding area. And so there's only room for 2, and that's what we're going forward with.
With regard to the city of Bellingham, we've adopted fee schedules which are designed to be low and relate also to our ordinary parking fee structure for the downtown and Fairhaven at least, so that electric charging parking spots are not disadvantaged and that the rate is competitive based on what we think the market has been, and we'll revise that. So we will be charging a low competitive rate.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever the city of Bellingham wants to do. I just was, if it was coming from WTA funds and resources, I thought we would be charging, but we're not. So that's great. I'm just kind of concerned about only having 2. You know, there's a big, only having 2 and having room for 2. I suppose in the future there's a way to work around that and having room for more. But it you know, from everything we've talked about, in the next 10 to 20 years, we may be a majority, or if not all, electric buses. So you may not know the answer to this, but what is the long-term plan for electrical there at that Cordata station, or has there been any thought put into it at this point? And that might be a question for Les, but it'd be nice to be able to utilize this money and energy to the most we could for that those electric buses.
So as part of the Well, Andy, do you have anything you want to say? So as part of the study, what we're finding on that is that ultimately when they get to the wattage that's kilowatts per hour that's needed, there's only, I think it's 98% of the routes can be covered. So we don't foresee a long-term need there, but want to preserve that opportunity to be able to do that, particularly as we're ramping up on that. So I'm not sure at this point that we will need more than the potential 2 for en route. But part of the reason we're upsizing is to preserve capacity in case we need to do something more down the road. It's this balance of, you don't want to do too much now that you may not need and overbuild with uncertainty, and that's what we're trying to balance. And so that's why 2 going in, because we think that's good at this point, but oversized in case we need to go more.
I would add, we don't have a huge number of routes that go into Coronado. So there are a limited number of buses that do use that facility today. So this, I think 2 would be plenty for the future.
When you say future, Tim, 5 years, 10 years, a million years?
A million years is hard to say.
Yeah.
I would say there's no immediate need. It does obviously allow us to provide additional options for where we put those the newer electric vehicles. Given the low kilowatts per hour that we have in the current vehicles at about 450, I think. So that would allow us more options to place those vehicles in service if we wanted to, as well as standby vehicles, but it's not an immediate need.
So both Eric and my questions are basically very typical board questions. We're looking way out in the future and want to make sure immediate decisions leave options open later. So you can understand that. Any further discussion or a motion?
I move we approve the contract for construction of infrastructure upgrades at Coronado Station for electrical charging hardware.
Second.
We have a motion before us. This is a job order contract. The approximate value is $404,000. In addition, the city of Bellingham will be adding another $350,000 for the other component of this project. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Todd. Good to see you here too. You're listed as iPhone.
I'm shut out of my email. I can't get into office. So
Well, I'm glad you're here. Thank you. Next item is consideration of approval of resolution 243-23, which amends the 2023 budgeted full-time equivalent count. Ms. Shipman.
Good morning. So we're asking the board to approve the amendment to the 2023 operating budget and the associated resolution to increase the transit operator FTE count by 3, and overall the agency account also by 3. And for background on this is related to the changes to Route 75 that the board considered on a few occasions and approved on January 19th of this year, primarily to add a new ADA corridor, look at some reduction of flex area and some other efficiencies that the team is looking to implement. And when we analyzed this, we decided we needed 3 transit operators to support the new service. The costs of the operators has been incorporated into the costs you see below that are budgeted. We just need the authority to bump up the FTE count in the budget so that we are on average under or at that number. Additional vehicles may be needed for this service also. We haven't determined that. If we need additional vehicles, we'll be coming back to the board with potential capital budget amendments to those. The cost of these 3 new positions will be budgeted going forward as part of the plan for this rollout. Currently, we have 172 transit operators and we have 10 in training. So if all went well in June, we would have 182. And it's probably the first time in a long time that we've been close to being at our budgeted FTE count. So we're going to build in that capacity so if we can continue on this great recruiting and retention path, we won't bump up against the authority and need.
Thank you. Board members? Well, if there are no questions, would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion before us to approve the budget resolution. This budget resolution doesn't appreciably add expenses, but does increase the authorized FTE count by 3 transit operators. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
If I could just add that, we will now amend the budget online so that it reflects the changes, so public can see.
Thank you. Next item is consideration of approval of the bylaws amendment, adjusting the timing for board minutes approval.
Yes, so this is a kind of a housekeeping measure that, whereas we're looking back through the bylaws, when we switched from first to third board meetings, the way the minutes were written was for a monthly meeting. So what we're proposing here is that the first meeting minutes would be in the first meeting minutes of the next month, and second in the second meeting, to give Vicki time to do that and get it into the packet in time. So it just kind of correlates with the movement of 2 board meetings a month as opposed to 1. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. A 1-month interval between the meeting and when the minutes are presented. Board members?
Yeah, it makes sense. I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. I agree. It makes sense. Any further discussion? All those in favor of signifying a change of the bylaws for the regard to the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. We now go on to the consent agenda, which consists of routine expenditures and approval of said minutes.
Move we approve.
Second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes and routine expenditures are approved. Reports to the board. Mr. Benson, annual safety report.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Josh here to view this up. Say that some of the metrics in this report are required by the FTA. Some of them are internal agency safety performance targets and metrics that we track internally. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. This is all for 2022. Next slide, please. So we're going to be talking a lot about preventable accidents this morning. That's one of the definitions that the National Safety Council uses: an accident in which the driver failed to do everything reasonable to prevent it. That's our standard for our rulings for accidents here at WTA. And I would also like to just give a brief example of the difference between at fault and a preventable accident. We have had operators involved in accidents out there in the field where the other motorist was actually cited for a traffic violation. But after further review of video and documents and supervisors' reports, things of that nature, we determined that the accident was actually preventable on our part. So it doesn't happen very often, but that is something that we take into consideration. We do hold our operators here to a little bit higher standard, and they're all CDL holders, and it's just kind of how we go about looking at rulings. So next slide, please. These are the required FTA safety targets that are also in our agency safety plan. You'll see across the top in 2021 that there are 7 categories: fatalities, injuries, safety events, and system reliability. They're all tied to per 100,000 vehicle revenue miles, if you will, in a couple of those categories. And so that's something that is a requirement by the FTA, as I mentioned. I would also add that the 2021 safety performance numbers also became our goal for the 2022 safety performance, in which case, if you look at the paratransit line there, we kind of missed our goal. We had 1 injury in paratransit where somebody was medically transported, which bumped our metric up to 0.12, if you will. I'll also add that a safety event is triggered by National Transit database thresholds, $25,000 or more in property damage if we had to evacuate a bus for fire reasons or any other reasons. Let's see, I think acts of God is another one, and anybody that's transported to a medical facility for treatment would fall under the safety event, which would also double as an injury as well. As far as the system reliability goes, that's a figure that we use for per 100,000 miles, and the distance we drive between major mechanical failures. And so that's another document. It's more fleet driven, I think, but you'll see that in paratransit, we dropped a bit to just under 32,000 miles. The previous year we were at 53,000. So pretty decent numbers as far as 2022 went for safety performance. I would also add that the FTA does not set these benchmarks for us. It's something that we do internally, nor will they penalize us for not hitting the goal that we have set for ourselves. So next slide, please. Here's a 5-year snapshot of our preventable accidents by mode. I didn't put a total on here. I probably should have, but in 2018, we had a total of 45 preventable accidents. That dropped to, or no, I'm sorry, it was 32, excuse me, in 2018. We had 45 in 2019. We only had 16 preventable accidents in 2020, but we didn't drive many miles during the pandemic. That bumped up a bit to 33 in 2021. And then last year, we had 26 preventable accidents. You'll see that in van pool, admin, and maintenance, not a lot of activity. Most of our accidents tend to be in fixed route and paratransit. The next slide is simply a bar graph showing all modes of transportation and the number of accidents by mode. You can see that most of our accidents are in fixed route, followed by paratransit. So this is an internal metric that we track by per 100,000 revenue miles for fixed route and paratransit combined. The lower the number, the better. See that in 2022, we were at 0.82, which was a pretty decent decrease from the previous year. Again, not quite as impressive as 2020, but again, it all comes down to the number of miles we're out there driving around. So the next slide is also just a bar graph of the preventable accident frequency per 100,000 miles there by combined fixed route and paratransit as well. So we like to track this because it has to do with money, and accidents are costly. And you'll see that the lower the number, the better here. You'll see that in the last 4 years, we've been able to drive that number down to just under $1,600 for 2022, excuse me. And we like to track this on a regular basis just because accidents can be costly, particularly in paratransit when we're transporting elderly people. Slips, trips, and falls, things of that nature can get pretty expensive when you get the medical field involved. So again, we're doing a pretty good job of keeping the numbers down here for our accident costs. Just as a side note, I don't have the rest of the numbers, but last year I think we paid out about $48,000 in claims, excuse me, for accidents here at WTA. A quick snapshot here of the number of miles we've driven in revenue service by mode. You'll see that in fixed route, it's the highest number we've seen in 5 years. We're over pre-pandemic mileage by about 10,000 miles from 2019 in fixed route. Paratransit, we're creeping upward, but not quite where we were in 2018 or 2019. And unfortunately, van pool continues to drop year after year. So it's a quick look at the miles driven. So this particular slide is probably the most important to me because it has to do with our employee injury rates. And it's important for us to remain safe and on the job so that we can go out and deliver service. This is pretty well standard OSHA formula for coming up with a total recordable injury rate. You'll see that we had a little bit of a jump in injuries from the previous year. The transportation industry average is 4.25 to 4.50. So we're about average for the year, but we did have 4 more injuries than the previous year.
So Jeff, that transportation industry average, that's not just transit, that's other kinds of transportation?
That's correct. That would be long haul trucking. That would be logistics. It's not just transit. I haven't been able to locate a transit average, if you will. So I've just been using the transportation average in general. So some of those injuries are repetitive. Many of them are shoulder and lower back strains and sprains, that kind of thing. We are trying to get some of our paratransit personnel to call dispatch for help if they are overloaded with bags or they're having trouble maneuvering up a slope into a building, that kind of thing. And we're going to be working on that through this year with mobility and training to see if we can get a little more traction with folks asking for help. I appreciate the fact that our drivers go out there and want to get the job done and do what they can, but we have seen a few instances where a little bit of help would have avoided some type of an injury to our employees. So, next slide.
I can say one thing about that too, is I think one of the things that historically WTA is good is that it's a culture of reporting. So people are encouraged to report because it's a way to, as Jeff said, learn and get better from it. And so I think that needs to be factored in when we're looking at numbers and things like that, because we want to know so we can improve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just to kind of wrap things up here are some numbers. Year over year, we did see a decrease of 21% in preventable accidents in all modes. Unfortunately, like I just mentioned, that was a 36% increase in employee injuries. We did drive 10% more miles in fixed route and paratransit and van pool. And that last bullet is something we need to do some work on as well, because 73% of our accidents last year, we hit stationary objects, parked cars, bollards, mirror strikes with parked other transit buses at the stations, that type of thing. So we're going to be working with WizTip, our insurance pool, and coming up with some strategies to try and drive that number down for 2023. The good news, I guess, if there is an upside to that, is that we're not having a lot of moving accidents, collisions on the roadway with other vehicles at 35, 40 miles an hour, which can be quite costly. So. Or people. Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Jeff. Board members? I've just an observation. I always caution against interpreting year over year differences, but rather look for trends across years. And I'm not really seeing any particular trends getting worse or getting better. They're just low and staying low. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate. Yeah, I would say we frequently have accidents of low severity.
Yeah, and that was the other thing, is you showed that high percentage of fixed objects, but since that's a percentage, you could go up simply because, as you say, you're having less moving problems. So that number could go really high if there were like zero. It could go to infinity if there were zero moving accidents. So you got to be careful to interpret that as a bad number. It might actually be a good number.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people need to realize that the places our paratransit operators find themselves in, they're all over the county, parking lots, there's just a lot of hazards, particularly in paratransit, but they do a pretty fine job of getting folks where they're going. And
some of those building designs aren't thought of for paratransit.
They are not.
The building hit us? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. They keep jumping out and biting us.
Usually from above.
Right.
Board members, any questions for Jeff? And then Jeff has the next item too, I believe.
He does.
Why don't you roll into it, Jeff?
Okay, mission statement bullet 1 for our mission statement here at WTA indicates that we're trying to deliver safe, reliable, efficient, and friendly service. And today I'm really going to just focus on the safety part of it because that has risen to the top for us as a priority here at WTA as we move into 2023. We feel that the safety and security for our employees and our customers have become priority 1, if you will. And so here are some of the things that we're planning on implementing and we're currently working on if we haven't already implemented some of these items for this year. We are currently going to extend the contract with Express Personnel through September for the staffing of our washroom attendants at Bellingham Station. This has had a positive impact, we think, on drug use in the bathroom. We have been able to see a decrease in that type of activity by having an attendant on duty. So we're going to continue with that through September. We have reconfigured our washrooms with by removing the exterior doors to allow for easier monitoring of who's going in and out of the restrooms. We also added access control features on the bathroom doors, allowing staff members to make contact with individuals that are asking to use the restroom so that we can have an idea of the number of people in the washrooms and who's in there and at what times. So that we hope that that will also mitigate some of the behavior we're seeing. We have reduced the Bellingham Station lobby hours so that they coincide with when our bathroom attendants are off duty. We hope that that will reduce loitering and seeing folks that aren't necessarily riding the bus, collecting in the lobby and just kind of hanging out there for us. So we're gonna reduce. Is that in effect, Eric? It is. Okay, so the reduced hours are in effect currently. We're also considering and working on currently installing a video monitor in Bellingham Station so that when people come into the station, they will see that they are on camera, much like some of the retail establishments around that have done the same thing. It's not uncommon now to walk into a retail location and see that you're on camera. We think that there may be some ability to deter bad behavior when people see that they're on camera as well.
Are those cameras in the lobby and also on the concourse?
We have cameras in both locations. Josh, will we need to install a different camera in the lobby to do that?
No, we won't install different cameras. I think the focus of the monitor was on the cameras that are in the lobby. But I hadn't really thought about showing
Different view. Yeah, okay.
The hope was that as people walk into the lobby, they realize that they're being monitored.
As far as the cameras go, it's a public area. It's WTA's cameras. Obviously, the prevention of crime is the main reason to get them. But when criminal acts do occur or there's a police investigation, do we have a procedure of handing over that information to law enforcement who's conducting an investigation? Okay.
We certainly do. I'm contacted on a pretty regular basis by Bellingham PD and Homeland Security, Border Patrol have all asked WTA for cameras or camera views from our buses on our stations when they're looking for people of interest. So that is not an uncommon request at all. So,
on a related matter, do we have retention policies? So the city, we have a lot of video and body cam footage, and we dispose of it on a regular basis unless there's a reason to keep it. Do we have retention policies?
we do.
What are they?
We follow the 30-day retention policy as established by the Secretary of State. So we keep the video footage for 30 days unless there's an identified incident, and then we'll extract the video for that incident and keep it per the retention schedule for that type of case, whether it's a lawsuit or something else.
Okay, a few more things to cover here, and I'll wrap it up here. Our marketing department's currently working on a public awareness campaign. This will consist of some new messaging to our riders surrounding things like drug use and violating our code of conduct. Reporting options for our riders in order to report bad behavior is also being looked into. And also mentioning to folks as a side note that assaulting a transit employee is in fact a felony. And so we're going to be kind of reconfiguring some of our messaging around that with signage at our stations. And hopefully that will help as well. We did provide Narcan training to about 20 of our employees through the Whatcom County Health Department earlier in the year. And we have made naloxone available to our employees that have received that training. And they can voluntarily choose to carry that on their person if they decide, or not. We're not making it a mandatory thing, but we do have some employees that have shown some interest in that. And we think that's a good thing for them to do as well. Real quickly.
Position those at Narcan at various locations.
Yes, yeah, thank you. We do have that near our AED machines at Bellingham Station, Cordata Station here at Moab. So it's available in the event of an emergency at our stations as well.
This is nasal Narcan?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, not injections. As many of you know, we are increasing our safety department by four positions for our transit safety officer program. Some of their primary duties when they come on board in June, we're currently recruiting for 3 of those positions, will be to get out on the buses, riding routes, being on our station properties, and hopefully we will be able to mitigate some of the bad behavior we're seeing before it escalates, so we can support our operators, our CSRs, our supervisory work group, and we're looking for that to make an immediate impact. It will be difficult with 4 people to cover the entire county. So we have collected data since last June to identify the days of the week, the time of day that some of these things are happening, so that we can, when we set up the department and get going, we can deploy people in the most effective way that we see fit. And that will be an evolving type of thing, I'm sure, and we can adapt to what we're seeing out there. The youth on some of the county routes have been problematic lately, so it'll be nice to put a couple of people on a bus and get folks out there re-educating the riding public. As a side note, we do have a new digital form on our SharePoint web page for employees to report a safety concern or a hazard. And since we rolled that out about a week and a half ago, we have seen an uptick in reporting. So that has been a good thing. Those submitted concerns will go to the Safety and Security Committee for review, and we will look at these suggestions and concerns to see if it's something that we want to make a recommendation on and actually move forward and try to make a change in that regard. We also recently implemented a new policy for everybody to wear high visibility PPE in our bus yards, and that has been going pretty well since April 1st. And they're required to wear a high-vis yellow sash or a vest in our midway lot and in our bus yard at all times if they're outside of their vehicle. And lastly, I would like to invite everybody to our safety breakfast Wednesday, April 26th from 5 a.m. to 10. We'll be chefing it up for anybody that would like to attend.
What day, April?
April 26th is a Wednesday, next Wednesday.
That starts at like 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning?
Pretty early, yeah.
Okay.
0500.
0500.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jeff. That's all you have. Board members.
I will just say that parents in the county are aware of those troublesome youth riding the bus and of their bad behavior, and it is not something that, so I will say it's causing issues for parents that want to send their kids on the bus because of those certain kiddos that are misbehaving. So yes, we are aware of it out there, and
yeah.
Responsible parents are aware of it. Unfortunately, I think the kiddos that are causing the problems, their parents are not as responsive to some requests for change in behaviors. So.
Yes, Ms. Hawkinson and I had a conversation a week and a half ago or so regarding some youth in Ferndale that we are aware of. So we're well aware of the situation.
Allie, you want to weigh in?
I was just going to say that getting the school district involved really helped in Ferndale. And also just in like getting on social media and encouraging everyone who's been having issues with these kids to report it to the police, which, you know, we're not looking at criminal charges or anything. We want them, just want them to quit being turds. So yeah, I would encourage, because they're probably doing more than just harassing people on the bus. They're probably also causing issues other places, and so many people have cameras and stuff right now. If you can, you know, get in touch with local law enforcement and the schools, that really helped in Ferndale. At least that's been my experience. It's been a week and a half now, guys. I think we were successful.
I will add that we have talked with our marketing and community relations department about entering into a more robust discussion with some of our school districts as a way to share information about the right, you know, respecting the ride, if you will. So that's something that we have talked about.
And learning from them on how they teach kids to ride the school bus and what their expectations are. So it's a similar, they're hearing similar messages.
Jeff, with regard to the safety officers, how will they be attired, and will they have nice big lettering that says safety on the back of their vest or something like that?
It will indeed. We're going to uniform them so they are differentiated from our WTA operator type of a uniform. There will be some high-vis yellow coats. There'll be a tactical vest so they can carry their radios and their cell phones and what they need to carry on their person. Currently, we were looking at a teal and black and yellow color scheme, but we indeed will have patches identifying that they are transit safety officers.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line here. We don't want them to look like police or military, but we do want them to look official.
Yes, that is our plan moving forward.
Any other questions? I have another small controversial one. Okay, here we go. Controversy. City of Bellingham and Washington State has laws and policies that prohibit involvement in federal immigration enforcement. We have had camera requests from Border Patrol. If those are criminal matters, fine. If those are immigration related, then that may be an issue with regard to state law. What's going on there?
I would say we have had maybe 2 requests that had anything to do with immigration that we were aware of in the almost 8 years I've been here. So we don't see it frequently. And I don't know if the law enforcement officers would share that information with us regarding why they're asking to talk to somebody on the bus, or maybe even removing someone from the system or the property if they show up. So that would be something I'd need to look into. I don't know if they'd willingly share the reason why they're looking into wanting our camera information. I guess that's my thought on that.
We'll look into that with the state law, and maybe there's some questions we could ask.
Yeah, the state law prevents state officers from engaging, supporting, contributing, being involved in immigration enforcement as opposed to criminal matters. And Border Patrol does a lot of criminal matters.
Yeah.
I don't think that state law applies to WTA officials or to WTA, but it's kind of a policy decision that's consistent across the state. I don't know. I mean, sorry to bring up something, but it might be worth thinking about.
Yeah, definitely is. Yeah. And Mark Lee's on, so that'll be a follow-up with Mark.
Yeah, let me know if you need me to look into that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. We can talk about it when we talk tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, that was your mission statement update. Anything further? Questions for Jeff or anything? Moving on, annual service performance report.
Jim is kindly going to step in because Becky's out today.
So yeah, I'm in for Becky. This is just a very brief overview of our regular annual service performance report. Basically, the format is pretty much the same as what we've done for many, many years. Content has changed a little bit after the pandemic. We have some metrics that we're not measuring yet, or we haven't restarted measuring yet, such as on-time performance, but that's something that we hope to see in the future. So you should all have received a copy of that. I should ask that first off. And I would suggest that this is, we're hoping that we can transform this document into sort of a live look-in in the future to get it online, so we have more of an ongoing update versus just kind of an annual snapshot. We haven't decided whether we should or will do a future paper report, and that's probably up to the board to determine in the future, but we do want to add in that online component in the future. And planning is working with the IT department to set that up. As far as the content, yeah, some of it may be real time, some of it may be just quarterly, monthly, whatever makes sense for them.
More than just once a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would point you out to page 1, which is the major, I guess, findings for 2022. And I should say this is a kind of a reflection versus a look ahead kind of report. So I think we're in uncharted waters in terms of where we're at as an agency, like any other agency around the country. But just some data points, we are 65% of 2019 levels. We are seeing, obviously, from 2020, the low point of 2021, we've increased our ridership since that point. The Youth Ride Free program has been fully implemented with 18 and under. Some other things to note is I think the 2 major data points to look at would be the fixed route and the paratransit services. Our zone, flex, and Vanport make up a very, very small portion of our overall ridership, and that's just a typical thing every year. And then we also introduced the Linden Hop. It was introduced in 2021. So the comparison with 2022 to 2021 is not a full year comparison. So we're still evaluating that, obviously. Mary's working on an evaluation report right now for Linden Hop for the FTA, and we're going to share some of that information with you in the future. The other, I guess the final thing I'll mention about the report is we are beginning to introduce this idea of measuring equity in our system. You'll be hearing from Michael Harpool in the next couple months about service evaluation, which includes this new metrics around access to opportunity. But we did include a couple pages around some data points in terms of how well we're serving our priority populations. And that's on pages 13 to 14. So take note of that. I guess just one final note is it's always interesting for me to note page 6 and sort of the historical patterns of a ridership and things that have changed over time. So take note of that. I think for me, that's kind of the more interesting data points that it's interesting to look back. Not that history is any guide to the future, but it does kind of show things that we've done in the past and the effects on ridership and how things have changed over time. So with that, I'll just stop there and see if you have any questions.
If I could say just one thing to piggyback on that is Tim and the team are working hard on ridership is as we're going to environment and equity and this access to opportunities and things. Ridership is one important factor, but it's not the only factor that tells you how things are going. So how do you compare a ride across Western versus a ride in from Kendall from somebody who can't drive and needs to access service? Well, they may count as ridership as one against one, but that's not the same. So Tim, and that's part of what Michael will be talking about is how do we analyze those things, which I think is super important to get the full story of what is the value and return on investments for the sales tax dollars to the public.
Is ridership at 65% of 2019 levels and an average for transit right now? Do we have any comparisons to other local or regional services?
It's in the range. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you're seeing a variation between 50 to 75, 80%, but very few have returned the full 100%. I don't think any I've seen are back to what they were pre-pandemic, honestly. So I think some of the larger metro areas are lower, like 50%. And then some of the smaller agencies, which depend less on sort of the commute trip, are higher generally.
This is almost right in the middle of, from a WISTA, or right near the WISTA average. The Washington State Transit Association.
Any further questions on the service report? Okay, thank you, Tim. Upcoming paratransit changes.
Yes, Shelley is here to,
Two people to move forward. Okay.
to talk about that as we look at efficiency, and it's kind of in this theme of what we've been talking about. Shelley and Eric and the team have been looking at some changes to improve efficiency, and Dan kindly suggested as board member this would be a good thing to discuss with the board. So
yeah, I don't have any fun graphics or anything like that. It's really just a discussion. We have 4 changes coming up. One, which you're all well aware of, which is the paratransit corridor for the 75, which is just thrilling. We're so excited for those folks who qualify for that service being able to have it now instead of having to flex and change buses and all of that. So that's really exciting. That also has a lot of unknowns around it. We don't know how many people are going to want that service, or are they going to all be coming to Bellingham? Are they going to all be going to Linden? Or how that mix is going to happen. So there's a lot of unknowns about that. The other thing, there's some requirements from the ADA about how we book rides. So we are required by law to offer a choice for riders on whether they want to book a ride to their destination time or have a shorter pickup window. One of the complaints whenever we've ever surveyed paratransit riders is, oh, it's so long to wait. It's hard to wait that long, right? Before, and not knowing where the bus is, what time in that hour or 90 minutes the bus is going to come. So ADA requires that we offer the choice. So a person right now, so going forward, we're going to activate this on June 11th. A rider can choose, oh, I'm going to my doctor. I need to be there by 10. Okay, so they'll book the ride in that way. Oh, I'm going to the grocery store today. Can you just pick me up sometime after 9? So so what they're doing is basically opting for a shorter pickup window. So they'll have a half-hour wait time. So instead of having to wait an entire hour, it'll be a shorter window of time to wait. So that is required by the ADA. The other change that is required is comparable ride time. So, and that means comparing it to how long would that same trip take on fixed route. So it's not exact. You have to add walk time to it and all sorts of things. So there's background parameters that have to be set. But what it means is every individual ride might have a different pickup time. Whereas now, if it's a Bellingham, we just say, okay, it's a 60-minute window. So if I'm going from, maybe I'm going from Birchwood, like Little Caesars on Birchwood there, and I'm just going out to Jack in the Box. So on the 232, that takes 10 minutes. But before, I'd have that hour window to be picked up. Whereas now, the system will actually calculate that time and say, oh, okay, so you want to be there at this time, so your pickup might be 25 minutes earlier. So every ride is very specific to the point of origin, to the destination. Now, we haven't used this before. It's a function that is in our software. So we're testing right now. There's a lot of testing happening. And then the final change, which is the one that some of you board members might actually hear from your constituents about, is will calls. So will call means I have a ride, I've booked a ride from an origin to a destination, but I don't have any time attached to it. Yeah, so right now, those kinds of rides take up about 38% of our daily rides, which is very impactful. It's hard to schedule for them. because you literally do not have a time attached to them. So going forward, starting June 11th, we will be allowing will calls for medical appointment returns only. So I'm going to the doctor. I've scheduled my destination appointment. I want to be there 10. You don't want to be late. I don't know when my doctor is going to have me done. So I will call from that point. Right now, a person can do 4 will calls in a day. And it's like a string of taxis. So that is not what paratransit service is supposed to be. Will calls are not required by the ADA. Many systems don't do them at all. And if they do them, they charge a lot of money for them because they're considered by the ADA premium service. So all of those things work together for our efficiency. We don't have an unlimited amount of resources for drivers' equipment. And so we are trying to fine tune our paratransit service. So we are providing the right ride and being compliant at the same time.
Can you talk about cancellations on will calls?
Sure. So the will call cancellations, it's about 28% of those rides we actually don't perform. Whereas it's 22% are not performed versus a timed ride, a scheduled ride, about 2.8% of those are not performed. So there's a lot of inefficiencies. We're scheduling to have people ready to take all of those rides. I think there was a day earlier this week, where we had 660 rides for about 750 riders, meaning that some of them were 2 people traveling together, and we had over 300 of those were will. That's a lot. It's very difficult to schedule. Now, and again, we are starting with medical returns only. I think that everybody in operations is aware that this is a significant impact for a lot of people who ride paratransit. So you board members, you might get calls about that. So we just wanted you to know what was happening and why it was happening. And there'll be a lot of outreach over the next 6 weeks.
Shelley, how strict is the idea of medical return being interpreted? I mean, I assume dental returns and ophthalmology returns would be in there, but if I needed to get my hair cut, that's kind of similar. I don't know when I'll get out exactly. So
it is.
How strict are we going to interpret that?
Really strictly, because as soon as we start doing the one-offs, that's when it gets tough. And that's when it's like, well, it shouldn't be different based on the fact that I'm here today and I'm saying no, and we have somebody else who's here tomorrow and they're saying, oh, that sounds okay, let's do that. We're going to start with being very strict.
So working in the senior center in Linden, we experience a lot of will call.
Yep.
We call and say, hey, so-and-so's ready to go home now, and then come and pick. So as far as outreach, I would love to invite your team back out to the center.
Oh yeah.
To talk to, and I would say any senior center in the county, to kind of just explain the reason for this, because that's going to be impactful for a lot of people that we serve. So
yeah, and no rides are being denied. I wanted to make sure that's very clear. No rides are being denied. It's just a different kind of ride. And we do recognize we're calling this the summer of grace because it's going to take time for people to adjust. We might have to adjust our expectations, but
change is hard for the demographic that
change is hard for all of us, I think, but it will make us more efficient. And that helps us with the rides that we are legally required to provide, which is all of the timed rides. So basically we're moving timed rides to a higher percentage.
Can I just add one thing real quick as well? The timing of doing these changes together is really helpful. Being able to book your trip from a pickup time now, where you didn't used to be able to do that, you had to pick a destination time, will be helpful for those that have will calls. It's easier to schedule your day and say, I'm going to be at the at the shopping center for an hour, please pick me up at 10, as opposed to, I'm gonna be at the shopping center for a while, I need to be back home by 11, right? So the change in booking will help mitigate the impact of losing will calls in those cases. It's easier to plan your day with a pickup time than a destination time. So the timing of the changes together really works, but it's there'll be a large education component because it will be changed.
And it'll be a big education component for the CSR group who books the rides, because they've been the same script for how to book a ride for quite some time. And so we're working on their training right now, and yeah, it'll be okay.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Jen.
All right, thanks. So I wrote out something real quick because I believe this is an important topic. I do want to thank Les for making sure this was an agenda item for the board. One of the things that I brought up was I think it's equally important that we as a board approve changes to our paratransit service as we do with any changes to fixed route service. There are changes the agency is required to make so that they conform with interpretations of ADA regulations. That's, refers to the way the paratransit trips are booked and making sure the agency is conform to those regulations. But the will call trips are outside of the ADA regulations. These are trips that are booked that are on a specific time and are activated when a person calls. Dispatchers then can schedule the trip onto the bus. That makes the dispatcher's jobs harder and may cause the system to be less efficient, but it does not always. But just because something is hard or may have a minor effect on the system does not mean the agency should cease to offer this service or to severely limit this service without consent from the board and the public who utilize the service. A decision to end this practice or to severely limit this practice should go through the same process as we would for a change to the fixed route system. The agencies offer this type of trip for decades, and our riders have depended on this type of service for their quality of life. Our riders who use this service should have a say in what we are doing if it is not a regulatory change. And the board should vote on those changes as we do for our changes to our fixed route system. There are many situations where a will call is a better model. Riders traveling to appointments with an unknown duration, trips requiring only a short stay, dropping off paperwork, mailing a package, variable health of the rider on the day of the trip. Operationally, there's a lot of ways that, we can figure out a better way for them. And instead of having to say no, we can accommodate rides through the will call process. Will calls also support our mission statement, and there's a variety of service types to meet the community need. Our community supports this level of compassionate service as we've done it for a long time. So for me, I would ask the board to prioritize this as an action item and seek out public comments on this issue because it is outside of a regulatory thing, and we've done this for years. And just like we would do for a fixed route change, we should get public comment and find out what our constituents actually think of this before severely limiting their options.
So thank you, Dan. You bring up a process, and I guess I'd call it a governance question. When we change fixed route service, we follow a process, and there is a vote, not just a report to the board. I don't know, Les, do you feel prepared to kind of reflect on that issue yet, or should we think about it and get back to us?
Yeah. So like where the fixed route comes from, and Dan and I had some conversations, and I appreciate Dan bringing this up and flagging this to make sure that we're having this conversation. So the bylaws indicate that we go through where the fixed route comes from is the bylaws and the public hearing comment requirements in there that are when there's a change in transit fares, which this isn't, but when there's a substantial change in service that requires a public hearing includes, and then it lists out a number of things which I can forward out to the board for review. I can read them here, but it's probably better for the board to read those. But it talks about span of service of 10 minutes of the published start and end times, change in frequency of service, either increase or decrease, change of results in a decrease of service coverage, and then there's a distance geographic limit there. Change in the days of service, elimination of service, or when new transit route is established. And then there's a couple others, but it's budget. There's penalties for criminal stuff. But that's really the substantive part about it. Historically, my understanding is paratransit changes haven't come because there was a thought that it didn't fit there. When Dan brought this up, I thought it was good to have this discussion with the board and highlights the issue and why we haven't historically brought it forward, but it is an issue for a board if you would like to be able to approve those or not. So it's our thought was that it's more of it's kind of an efficiency thing because the ridership of these road calls, when you don't know where they are, how do you schedule them? And we have a lot of downtime, in my humble opinion, of rides that get canceled. That's why I was curious on the cancellation thing, where you can't then redeploy them in a quick manner to go pick up somebody else.
Well, but those same arguments about route changes for efficiencies and to avoid, say, extra long layovers. I mean, efficiency could motivate a fixed route change, but that would trigger a process. So I think it's a governance question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any other board members want to weigh in at this point. I mean, Dan has raised an issue. They could just drop where it is or could keep going. Does any other board members have a thought? If not, then it just ends here.
I am wondering, I do agree with Dan. I think this sounds like a very significant change to service, and having compared it to like a fixed route, I was prepared to accept it and just go on with it. But having the thought brought up, it is a large service that we provide to our community. And I'm wondering if a substantial change to any service, van pool, I mean, even though van pool might be a minor component, but van pool or paratransit or fixed route, if that does come to the board for consideration before large changes are being made. I would agree, yes, it should come to the board.
So again, I want to separate the substantive issues about whether or not this is a good change from the governance issues,
Yes.
about whether or not significant changes in any kind of service deserve board review. Unfortunately, Mr. Davidson had to leave and there's two other board members here. I hate this. Seems like we get to important subjects at the end. It is a governance issue. I think the board needs to weigh in. I hereby formally request that we bring this matter up soon at a meeting, and again, address it as a governance issue rather than just talk about paratransit service. That's how I'm interpreting it. But that's the issue we can look at going forward.
I would agree with that.
Is that okay? Any objection to that? Hearing no objection? So bring it up as a governance issue.
Yeah, I will forward out, make sure and highlight the part of the bylaws
Right,
that's
so
relevant, and then we can talk about what substantial change in service means.
Right,
from a
and you use the word
governance issue.
significant, substantial.
Yeah. Okay, can do.
Thank you, Dan. Darn, we are over, but we need to go on to the general manager's report. Les, I think you have a couple, or at least one important item I wanted you to bring up, and I'm sure there's more.
Yes, so the one important item, this will be brought back as a formal agenda item, but would respectfully request the board to consider tabling the zero fare discussion for 2 years, or potentially longer, but approximately 2 years would be the recommendation to allow us to, it's a workload issue. Another is to allow us to work through the transformational changes that we're looking at, the transit-oriented development, the rapid transits, the zero emission bus, on demand, those things, so that we can put effort into that. And it is the fair component is a component that the board will need to look at in conjunction with what is our resourcing capacity going forward to do these other transformational things. And so I feel like it needs to be part of a package discussion as opposed to a independent siloed. And just like all these transformational things, I think need to be looked at together because they all have impacts and second and third order effects on each other, depending on if their decisions are made in a silo, there could be unintended consequences on some of the others, much like we talked about with the zero emission bus issue. If you make that in a silo, it's going to have impacts on others. So this would be coming back as an agenda item to discuss, but wanted to give a heads up on that in discussions with Michael. We thought that would be good to give a heads up today and then bring it back. So I'll pause there. You want me to keep? The other ones are easy. State auditor audit starts on Monday. There's no entrance conference on that. Michael is doing as the board chair, risk assessments with the auditors. There will be obviously an exit conference at the end. And as we find out what they're going to look at and things, we'll give you an update on that. And then the other fun events invite the board to is on May 7th, which is a Sunday, is the rodeo, which is a super fun event. If you haven't seen one, it's a great driver competition. There's kind of an obstacle course, if you will, on that, and it's super fun. There's food and music, and this year for kids will be a petting zoo and some fun stuff to go along with it. So that's all I have.
And where is that? That's here?
That's here. Yes.
What time is that on the 7th?
No, it probably starts at 8.
8 for
Goes
judges,
through probably
9.
2.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Audra knows, she's leading.
Audra?
8 if you're going to be a judge, and 9 o'clock for contestants and spectators.
So about 9 o'clock.
Will any moving buildings be involved?
Strongest man competition, pulling a bus with your teeth.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think that concludes all our business. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Les? Okay, thank you, everyone. This concludes WTA Board of Directors meeting, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.